The day Belle Thornwick decided that my family's 100-year-old lake was suddenly her darling son's playground was the day. She picked the wrong rancher to mess with. 6 a.m. sharp, 3 squad cars tearing up my driveway, gravel spitting like machine gun fire. Beneath their wheels, diesel exhaust swirling through the crisp air, tangling with the steam from the coffee still warm in my hands. And there she was, the HOA president herself, perched in her spotless Range Rover, camera rolling, practically drooling as officers fanned out across my porch. Her claim that I was trespassing on my own land, the same ground my great-grandfather staked in 1887. Meanwhile, her Instagram-famous son had been charging strangers $100 a head to fish in my private lake, the same water where my grandmother's ashes were laid to rest. Then Belle, in full Mama Karen fashion, whipped out forged paperwork, insisting I was illegally blocking community access. But Belle made one critical mistake. She had no clue. I held the purse strings to every service, keeping her perfect little subdivision afloat. Drop me a comment. Have you ever wanted to utterly dismantle someone trying to steal from your family? And tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our ranching family stretches across the country. My name's Garrett Holloway, and this is the story of how a suburban HOA president tried to rip away my family's soul and discovered why you never cross a rancher who knows the law. 20-400 acres of Montana paradise, carved from wilderness by my great-grandfather Augustus back in 1887. At its heart, a spring-fed 12-acre lake where he built our first cabin. That lake has seen for generations of Holloways born, raised, and finally laid to rest. I can still see the morning coffee steam drifting into the mountain air, feel the creak of leather beneath me on a saddle, hear meadowlarks calling across open pasture. This land isn't property, it's blood, sweat, and legacy. When Grandma Eleanor passed 3 years ago, we scattered her ashes at sunset along those smooth stones where she once shelled peas, laughing while her grandkids swam. On still nights, the sound of rippling water carries her laughter back to me. I'm 45 now, divorced, alone since my daughter Skylar went off to college. Been working this ranch since I was old enough to grip the reins. I plan to die here. Never thought some HOA queen bee would try to strip away everything my family built. But 5 years back, it all shifted. A developer scooped up the neighboring tract, swearing rural harmony while stuffing 100 McMansions onto tiny postage stamp lots. They named it Whispering Pines Estates, and like a fool, I signed an easement for emergency access just trying to be neighborly. That's when Belle Thornwick slithered into my world like a rattlesnake in designer heels. Late 40s, blonde highlights worth more than my monthly feed bill. Range Rover polished cleaner than her conscience. A realtor married to some bank VP, the type who treats the word agriculture like it's a contagious disease. The complaints started rolling in instantly. My cattle stank was ruining her dinner parties. The wild native grasses outside her kitchen view, unkempt. Couldn't I mow them down, make it look professional? I laughed. Big mistake. Then her precious son, Tucker, found my lake. 22 years old, an Instagram influencer with the work ethic of a dead possum. He dragged in his buddies for content creation, if you can call it that. Diesel pickups roaring down my road at sunrise, empty beer bottles glinting in the cattails, thumping bass drowning out bird songs that have echoed here longer than his bloodline's been alive. What started as tolerance became trespassing. Trespassing turned into business. Soon, it was full-scale exploitation. Drones buzzing overhead, camera crews setting up like a movie set. Tucker charging $300 a pop for exclusive wilderness access. He bragged online, like he'd inherited the place himself. The stench of entitlement was thicker than a fresh manure pile. And then came Belle's so-called trump card, or so she thought. Evening knock, manila folder in her hand, that smug, patronizing smile that makes your skin crawl. Garrett, I've done some historical research, she cooed, voice dripping with fake concern. The original homestead records show recreational water rights reserved for township residents. She laid photocopied papers across my kitchen table, her polished nails tapping the county clerk's stamp. We have to honor community traditions, she insisted. I'd read enough legal filings in my time to recognize clumsy forgery. Her documents cited Whispering Pines Township cute, except that subdivision hadn't been built until 2019. My great-grandfather's homestead had been here 132 years before that. But I remembered my grandfather's warning: when someone hands you fake papers, don't call them out. Let them think you're convinced while you gather proof of their fraud. I'll need to go over these with my attorney, I said, snapping photos of every page. Her smile flickered. Surely that won't be necessary. We're all neighbors. Here, the coffee in my mug had long since gone cold. Outside, the cattle were bedding down for the night, their lowing drifting across the land my ancestors' blood to secure. And there she sat in my kitchen, surrounded by 4 generations of memories trying to steal our most sacred ground with forged paperwork. But Belle had already slipped. She believed kindness was weakness. She believed being rural meant being naive. She believed a rancher wouldn't know how to fight back. She was about to learn the hard way. Montana ranchers don't just know the land, we know the law. And when someone tries to take your heritage with false documents, you don't simply defend yourself. You dismantle them. Belle didn't just wave her counterfeits around. She turned the entire county system into a weapon. 2 weeks later, County Inspector Martinez knocked on my door, looking downright uncomfortable. "Sorry, Garrett. Got a formal complaint about illegal water access restrictions." Ladies called headquarters 3 times demanding immediate action. We walked the property together. Martinez shaking his head. "This is nonsense. Your paperwork's airtight. Boundaries are solid. No violations anywhere." Still, he had to file the report. Belle was building a paper trail, creating the appearance of an ongoing dispute. Clever, malicious, but clever. And then came the real gut punch. Belle hosted a community safety meeting at her subdivision's clubhouse. 15 neighbors showed up, mostly newcomers who'd never set foot on working ranch land. Standing in front of poster-sized aerial photos, she pointed like a general at a war briefing. "This man's cattle are polluting our children's water supply," she announced, voice dripping with manufactured concern. "His increasingly hostile behavior toward families in traditional recreation areas points to serious mental instability. We came here for peaceful country living, not to be terrorized by some feudal rancher who thinks he owns the valley." The lies stung, but the financial rumors cut deeper. Whispers that inheritance taxes had crushed me, that the ranch was failing, that I'd be forced to sell to developers within months. Out here in ranch country, accusing a man of not paying his debts is the same as dragging his name through the mud. That's character assassination, and it demands a response. My grandfather always swore the only real weapon against liars was overwhelming proof. So, I went straight to the county's top surveyor, Martinez's brother-in-law, and paid him $800 for a GPS boundary map. Money well spent. The satellite data showed Belle's perfect little fence trespassing 3 feet into my land for nearly 200 yards. After that came security, 8 high-end cameras, night vision, full cloud backup, positioned to watch every inch of lake access. The rhythm of steel posts driving into Montana hardpan sounded like war drums. Still, I remembered something from my divorce proceedings: adverse possession. In the state, 5 years of uninterrupted trespassing could actually give someone legal grounds to claim your property. Letting Tucker and his circus run wild every day wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. The cameras would do more than record. They'd prove I was actively defending my rights. And within days, they paid off. For Saturday morning, Tucker showed up with an entire production crew, lights, boom mix, even catering. They were shooting an energy drink ad, selling the world on authentic Montana wilderness. The best part, the audio caught Tucker bragging, "This is my family's lake. Been coming here since I was a kid." Except Tucker was born in Phoenix. He'd only moved here 5 years back, but the footage uncovered something even worse. Tucker wasn't just lying about ownership, he'd built a business on it. His Instagram blew up to 50,000 followers after that viral Hidden Paradise clip. Now he was charging wannabe influencers $300 a head for exclusive lake access every weekend. Cars clogged the county road. Strangers trampled through my pastures, scattering trash, spooking cattle. Pine needles reeked of abandoned camping gear. Beer bottles sparkled in the grass like landmines. My best bull Augustus, named for my great-grandfather, stopped eating right. The stress spread through the herd. This wasn't some hobbyist with a camera. It was large-scale exploitation of my family's most sacred land. Then came the twist that pushed things over the edge. Tucker's latest Instagram post showed him proudly building a rustic fishing dock at his family's traditional spot, except the dock was planted squarely on my property, and he was charging clients extra for the privilege. The time-lapse video racked up 30,000 likes, but I had every second of construction on camera, plus audio of Tucker boasting about his profits to the crew, trespassing, vandalism, commercial fraud, and all of it in his own words. That night, sipping whiskey on my porch while the cattle finally settled, it hit me Belle had made a fatal error. She thought some backcountry rancher wouldn't know how to fight suburban-style warfare. She assumed rural meant ignorant, that I'd caved to fake documents and crocodile tears. But ranchers here don't just know cattle and fences, we know law, politics, and how to turn a paper trail into a wrecking ball. Her son's little empire was built on stolen ground, and stolen foundations crumble fast, especially when you own the detonator. Belle's next move proved she hadn't learned a damn thing. 3 neighbors came to my door the following Tuesday: the Hendersons, the Patels, and a new family whose names slipped past me. They looked miserable, shifting their weight like schoolkids forced to apologize. Henderson finally muttered, "Garrett, we're filing a joint nuisance complaint. HOA says cattle operations violate the subdivision's residential harmony standards." I'd known Henderson 3 years. Good guy. Helped me round up strays before. But Belle had gotten to him. "What nuisance, Bob?" I asked. He avoided my eyes. "The smell. The noise. Early morning cattle sounds hurt property values." There it was. Belle had convinced them that my ranch, which had been here over a century before their subdivision, was ruining their investments. She was building a case, shaping the illusion of neighborhood opposition. But her real escalation came 3 days later. I was checking fence lines when my phone buzzed. Sheriff's dispatch, domestic disturbance, possible threats of violence. My gut dropped. The address was mine. Deputy Collins arrived fast, body cam rolling, eyes tense. "Garrett, we got a call. Neighbor says you threatened her. Aggressive behavior during a property dispute. Implied violence." "Which neighbor?" I asked. "Belle Thornwick. Says you told her to stay off your land or else. Claimed you made threatening gestures." I almost laughed. Almost. Collins wasn't joking. In today's world, accusations stick even when they're nothing but smoke. But I remembered my lawyer's advice from the divorce. Stay calm with law enforcement. Never defensive, and always present evidence cleanly. "Deputy, I've got cameras covering every corner of my land. When did this supposedly happen?" Collins checked his notes. "Yesterday, about 4 p.m., east fence line." I pulled up my cloud feed. Let's see. The footage played perfectly. Belle walking up to my fence, me calmly explaining property lines. 15 feet away, speaking evenly. Her screaming accusations about rural terrorism and community threats. Me walking away without raising my voice, without so much as a gesture. Collins watched, shook his head. Lady's clearly not telling the truth. He made notes in his report. Then he looked up. "But Garrett, you should know she's filing for a restraining order. Claims you've got a history of aggressive behavior toward subdivision residents. A restraining order. Genius, even if her claim got thrown out. The fact that it was filed at all would still leave a legal record branding me as unstable. Dangerous, the aggressor in this mess. Her husband's law firm, a glaring conflict of interest she conveniently failed to mention, was almost certainly guiding her every move, but could play the paperwork game. From the very first incident, I'd been studying Montana property statutes, everything from homestead protections to water rights to harassment laws. And I'd learned something important. Submitting a false police report isn't just dishonest. It's a felony. Each fake report carries up to 2 years in prison. And every single filing counts as its own criminal charge. On top of that, the harassment I was tracking could justify civil damages, including attorney fees and harm to my reputation. My counterstrike wasn't slow or sloppy, it was precise. I filed my own harassment complaint, backed by 47 documented incidents. Over 6 months, every trespass, every bogus accusation, every attempt to sabotage my business ties logged, time-stamped, and supported with photo evidence. Then I brought in Mackenzie and Associates. The fallout hit fast. 3 local businesses pulled their contracts that week: the feed supplier, the vet clinic, and even the mechanic who'd kept my machinery running for 15 years. It was economic warfare, pure and simple, designed to break me into submission. But Bell's next escalation crossed the line into outright sabotage. Saturday morning, my water pump system collapsed. 80-year-old equipment finally failing? That's what I thought until I spotted the slashed electrical lines and shattered control panel. Hidden behind the pump house, repairs cost $8,000, and my cattle were left without water during the hottest week of the year. Security footage showed figures skulking around the pump house at 2 a.m. the night before, hooded and careful to keep their faces obscured. Smart but not smart enough to avoid leaving tire tracks in the mud. The tread matched perfectly to Tucker's lifted pickup. Sheriff Collins looked into it, but declared there wasn't enough evidence for charges. Interesting how law enforcement standards shift when politics come into play. Bell's husband, after all, sat on the county hospital board right alongside Collins' wife. Just coincidence? I'm sure. Still, every action sparks a reaction. And I'd been learning more than just property law at Schuyler. My daughter, with her mother's investigative instincts and a journalism major's tenacity, started digging into Bell's history while I handled repairs. What she uncovered was explosive. Bell had been fired from her old real estate job for falsifying documents. Online reviews accused her of conning elderly sellers with forged paperwork and inflated fees. Better yet, Schuyler found Bell's husband's bank was under federal audit for shady lending practices, the same bank financing Whispering Pines development and holding most of the residents' mortgages. If that bank went under, property values in the subdivision would collapse overnight. Meanwhile, Tucker's flashy Instagram empire was quietly laying the groundwork for its own implosion. His Free the Lake bash blew up online. Over to 100 RSVPSFOR. What was billed as a peaceful protest to reclaim public water access. But in influencer slang, peaceful protest translates to drunken takeover with tripods and drones. They descended Saturday night like a swarm. Cars lined the county road for half a mile. Strangers cut across my pasture, shawling coolers, tents, and camera rigs to shoot a Netflix series. The stench of weed tangled with grilling smoke as they colonized me shoreline, like an invading force. The chaos raged until 3 a.m. fireworks, booming above the lake where my grandmother's ashes rest. Electronic bass array synced night's timeless quiet. At sunrise, the aftermath hit me like a gut punch. Fences trampled, cattle scattered, and a grass fire sparked by Roman candles that torched 40 acres of pasture. The volunteer fire crew, sheriffs, deputies, and even an ambulance for 3 local poisonings were all called out. $15,000 in damages, not even counting destruction of wetlands and nesting areas. Police nabbed 3 kids for underage drinking, but Tucker and Bell slipped away before questioning how convenient. The next morning, while documenting the fire scars, I saw something that changed everything. The emergency services bill was addressed to my ranch, not the subdivision. Every police call, every fire run, every ambulance dispatched to Whispering Pines, all charged to me. I dug through old records, and the pattern was undeniable. For 5 years, every official response used to harass me had been paid out of my own taxes. Bell had been waging her war with my money. And that discovery led me deeper. In my grandfather's ancient filing cabinet, buried beneath decades of tractor receipts, I unearthed a folder stamped County Service District, 1962. Inside was dynamite and paperwork form documents, proving I held legal authority Bell didn't even know existed. Authority that could unravel her pristine suburban empire with a single phone call. The yellowed pages, sealed with official stamps from 1962, outlined the Rural Service District formation. Cedar Ridge County. My hands shook as I read. Between the legal jargon lay the key. In the 60s, Montana created special service districts to supplement municipal functions to rural areas. Since my grandfather's ranch was the largest holding, it became an anchor property for the whole region's roads, utilities, and emergency response. Here's the kicker. The ranch owner was automatically named a district administrator, a role that carried broad authority and transferred with the land itself, which meant I had unknowingly been the district supervisor for 3 years. The scope was staggering. I alone could approve or deny every service contract in the area, police patrols, fire coverage, EMS, even road maintenance to the subdivision. All of it required my authorization. Even better, I had the power to audit every expenditure and cancel contracts with 30 days' notice. Monday morning, my lawyer confirmed it, her voice practically buzzing. "Garrett, this is real. The 1962 Rural Service District Act is still active law. None of this was ever repealed. You've been paying for services that mostly benefit subdivision, and they've turned those same services against you." The numbers were jaw-dropping. The district's funding came from special property tax assessments that my ranch carried 60% of the burden, around $100,000 per year, while the entire HOA combined covered only 40%. For 5 years, I'd financed me own harassment, every bogus police call from Bell, every emergency run to Tucker's Rager's, every patrol car that appeared to intimidate me, all paid out of my pocket. But the real revelation came when we dug into 20 years of financials. The spending was blatantly corrupt. The HOA had billed the district for private luxuries, pool upkeep, landscaping, clubhouse utilities, even tennis court lights. Security contracts worth 4 times market rate went to firms owned by Bell's husband's buddies. They'd been bleeding public funds dry to bankroll their gated lifestyle. Thinking the dumb rancher would never notice, I'd found their Achilles heel. And it was greed. The beauty was in the simplicity. Montana's transparency laws guaranteed I could demand full access to every contract, invoice, and payment going back decades, and what I'd find could bury them. I had authority to audit, cancel contracts, refer fraud to prosecutors, and even cut off police, fire, and EMS access entirely. The leverage was immense, but the psychological edge. Skylar sat with her laptop open, tracking social media chatter and sketching out Bell's network. "Dad, it gets better," she said. "I've uncovered ties between the security firm that's been overbilling you and Bell's husband's bank. Same parent company, same physical address. They're running a kickback racket through municipal contracts. The plan took shape over strong coffee and Montana grit. 3 phases, each one designed to turn up the pressure while keeping us firmly within the law. Phase 1. Formal notice. As district administrator, I'd assert my authority, demand a full audit of financial records, notify all parties about pending contract reviews, and establish legal standing before taking the next step. Phase 2. Cutting services. We'd shut down the non-essentials first, the costly security patrols, emergency landscaping, event coordination. They'd start to feel the squeeze while we kept core safety services intact. Phase 3. Public showdown. At the next HOA meeting, with cameras rolling, we'd present hard evidence of corruption, maximum embarrassment, maximum legal exposure, maximum impact on the community. Sarah reminded me that Montana's sunshine laws would keep us protected. Every district meeting had to be open to the public. All financial records could be obtained. Under the Freedom of Information Act, Montana's transparency rules are some of the strictest in the country. Once you start demanding answers, they can't hide behind closed doors, she said. But I also recalled my research on civil forfeiture. Statutes, property or assets tied to criminal activity could be seized. If we proved Tucker's truck was used to haul gear for trespassing, or that Bell's home was bought with stolen money, we could recover far more than simple restitution. Timing was everything. Tucker's biggest Instagram spectacle was set for 3 weeks out, a wilderness challenge at the lake, sponsored by energy drink brands and drawing 500 participants. Perfect chance to document large-scale commercial trespassing and justify urgent action. Pete would dig through 10 years of service district spending, producing a forensic audit of every shady deal. Sarah would file civil suits for fraud, defamation, and conversion, while also submitting criminal referrals to state and federal prosecutors. Skylar would coordinate with the investigative journalist who'd been chasing HOA abuse stories, timing the coverage for maximum effect. But we also needed allies. In Montana, Influence comes from relationships, and Belle's husband's bank connections meant we had to line up serious support. The breakthrough came from an unexpected angle. Our neighbor Chuck Morrison, Pete's cousin, whose family had ranched here since the 1920s. He mentioned that County Commissioner Jana Torres, gearing up for re-election, was searching for issues that resonated with rural voters. She's been under pressure from developers pushing to rezone farmland, Chuck explained. She'd love a headline case that shows she stands with longtime families against suburban manipulation. Environmental groups were another natural fit. The Montana Wilderness Society had been documenting how Instagram-fueled tourism was trashing fragile ecosystems. Our lake's commercialization slid neatly into their narrative. Even within the subdivision, cracks were showing. 3 families confided in Chuck, complaining about sudden assessments and shady HOA finances. They'd happily back accountability, especially if it lowered their fees. The psychological groundwork mattered, too. This fight wasn't just about winning, it was about setting a precedent for rural property rights across the state. Farmers, ranchers, and generational landowners under similar pressure would be watching every move. When we wrapped the strategy session, Sarah handed me a thick binder of legal filings. "Garrett," she said, "you're about to be very well known. Law schools will study this case. Be ready for that kind of scrutiny." As I walked out to my truck, the mountain air carrying the sharp scent of pine and possibility, I knew something had shifted. For months, I'd been reacting, defending, documenting, trying to survive Belle's harassment while she controlled the story. Now the balance had flipped. I had the weapons. It was time to go on the attack. My opening strike came via certified mail that Tuesday morning, a formal letter to the HOA board. It asserted my authority as district administrator and demanded an immediate audit of all municipal contracts. The language was precise and razor-sharp, effective immediately. All service district expenditures require administrator approval. Any unauthorized spending of public funds for private subdivision amenities constitutes embezzlement. Under Montana Criminal Code Section 450-6316, you have 30 days to produce full financial records or face service termination. Proceedings, copies, were sent to county commissioners, the state attorney general, local media, and the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Overkill, maybe, but I wanted an audience when the dominoes began to fall. Belle's meltdown was instant and theatrical. Within hours, she'd called an emergency HOA meeting. Her email to residents was pure hysteria, urgent. Rancher threatens community safety. Emergency action required. She accused me of making terrorist threats, claiming I endangered children and seniors with extremist tactics. Her desperation became clearer when she reached out to the governor's office. My contact in county administration told me Martinez's wife worked there. Belle had tried to file a domestic terrorism complaint, alleging I was using control over infrastructure to threaten community survival. The governor's staff laughed her out of the building. Undeterred, she hired a Seattle PR firm, Pinnacle Crisis Management, experts in repairing reputations. Cost $37,000 for 2 weeks, paid with HOA funds without board approval. Another embezzlement count for her growing list of crimes. The smear campaign hit immediately. Fake accounts popped up across social media, posting Pete's forensic audit exposed years of criminal activity. The so-called security company billing for $100 a year turned out to be owned by Belle's brother-in-law, and most of their services only existed on paper. Actual patrol hours were less than 20% of what was billed. For years, they'd been siphoning $300 annually from public funds. The fraud didn't stop there. The subdivision's landscaping, pool upkeep, and clubhouse utilities were all being billed illegally to the service district. Even a tennis court lighting upgrade had been disguised as emergency road lighting. It was accounting so brazen that Bernie Madoff would have admired it. But Belle's most reckless move wasn't just financial, it was sabotage, meant to create an emergency that would justify her actions. On Thursday night, someone cut my fence lines in 3 separate spots, releasing cattle onto busy county roads during morning rush hour. The cuts were deliberate, placed where security cameras couldn't see, perfectly timed to cause maximum chaos. By 6 a.m., My phone was buzzing non-stop. 40 head of cattle had scattered across Highway 93, nearly causing multiple accidents. Sheriff's deputies, highway patrol, and emergency crews scrambled to contain the mess. Cleanup alone cost $12,000, not counting the liability risk if anyone had been hurt. Then came an anonymous call to dispatch, claiming I had released the cattle myself out of revenge, painting me as unstable. Exactly the story Belle had been pushing. What she didn't know was that my security upgrades included motion sensors along the fence line and infrared cameras covering the blind spots. The footage showed everything: Tucker's lifted pickup truck, 3 figures in hoodies, and the intentional weakening of fence posts designed to collapse under pressure. Even better, the audio recordings caught their conversation. "Make it look like the crazy rancher snapped," one voice said. "Belle wants it to look like he's dangerous." With that, Sheriff Collins finally had undeniable proof of a criminal conspiracy. By noon, Tucker's friends were under arrest, charged with criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy to damage property. Tucker tried to deny involvement, but his truck's GPS data placed him at the scene. Belle's next move was to call a town hall, claiming my ranching operation threatened the community's survival, and demanding the county seize my land through eminent domain. She had no idea she was walking straight into her own downfall. The arrests of 3 subdivision kids for felony property damage ignited a revolt she never saw coming. Parents, ordinary, decent people who had trusted Belle, were stunned to realize their children had been recruited into a criminal conspiracy by the very HOA president they'd believed in. Belle's response revealed the depth of her corruption. She hired high-profile defense attorney Marcus Webb, billing his $60,000 retainer straight to HOA funds without board approval. When questioned at an emergency meeting, she insisted it was appropriate to use community money to defend residents against rural aggression. The backlash was immediate. Homeowners began demanding full financial transparency, questioning years of inflated fees and bogus security expenses. 3 board members quit rather than face liability for Belle's unauthorized spending. Property values dropped 15% in just 2 weeks as news of the legal battles spread. Meanwhile, Pete's documentation kept unraveling a years-long criminal enterprise, shell companies, kickbacks, and theft that resembled organized crime. That $400,000 a year security firm, it was owned by Belle's husband's business partners, and over 5 years they had stolen nearly $2 million. The media storm only fueled the fire. Thanks to Schuyler's investigative journalism contacts, Channel 7 aired interviews with families who admitted Belle had pressured them into signing false complaints against me. Elderly residents revealed she had threatened foreclosure through her husband's bank if they refused to support her community safety projects. Reporters also uncovered Tucker's tax fraud. He'd made over $100,000 from illegal lake access fees while only reporting $37,000 in income. Federal charges for tax evasion and unreported business activity were already pending. His social media empire collapsed almost overnight. Sponsors dropped him, his follower count cratered, and even his energy drink partnership canceled its Wilderness Challenge event. Once they realized his family lake content was built on trespassing and fraud. But Belle's final act proved she was completely detached from reality. On Saturday evening, she approached me while I was repairing fence damage from her sabotage. She crossed my pasture in designer heels, stumbling awkwardly on uneven ground, sweat clinging to her despite the cooling air. "Garrett, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "This has gotten out of control." I kept working, letting my body camera roll. "What's there to talk about, Belle? I can make this all disappear." She offered $50,000 in cash if you drop the legal action and let Tucker use the lake once in a while. Just personal use, no business. On video, with audio, she had just handed me a federal bribery case. "You're offering to pay me with money stolen from my tax dollars?" I asked. Her composure cracked. "Look, maybe Tucker got carried away, but boys will be boys, and yes, maybe there were some accounting irregularities with the service district, but it wasn't malicious, just misunderstandings." Misunderstandings, I thought. $2 million in theft was a misunderstanding? Her desperation only grew. "I'll resign from the HOA board. We'll sell the house. We'll move away. Just please don't destroy our lives over some stupid lake." Some stupid lake. The same place where for generations of my family had been laid to rest, where my grandmother's ashes rested, where my great-grandfather had built our first home with his bare hands. She still didn't understand what she had tried to take from me, but her attempt at negotiation revealed something far more important. She could feel it coming. The federal probe was closing in fast. Her husband's bank was staring down criminal charges for fraud and money laundering. The dream house they'd purchased with stolen cash was about to be seized through civil forfeiture. Their polished suburban life was collapsing in on itself. And the pressure? That was all by design. The termination notices I'd issued had started the squeeze exactly where I wanted. Police patrols for the subdivision now cost the actual market rate $180,000 a year, not the $30,000 they'd been paying. Emergency response required upfront payment or private insurance. Road upkeep was dumped onto the HOA at $85,000 annually. By Monday morning, homeowners opened their mailboxes to find emergency assessments $3,200 per household to cover real service costs. Most couldn't afford it. The sudden financial burden sparked a crisis that threatened to bankrupt the entire community. By Tuesday, the HOA emergency meeting was standing room only, tempers boiling. Residents demanded answers for years of mismanagement. Some vowed to sue Bell personally to recover the stolen funds. Others discussed dissolving the HOA altogether, rather than let her corruption drag them into insolvency. But the ultimate showdown was already scheduled. The County Commission's public hearing on Service District Management Thursday at 2 p.m. Every side required to present evidence, testimony, and documentation with full media access. The perfect venue to end this war. Thursday afternoon, the Cedar Ridge Commission chamber was bursting past fire code. Local TV crews, reporters, live stream cameras. It was a circus. The air smelled of nerves, old coffee, and leather law books. I sat at the front table with Sarah Mackenzie, our binders stacked thick, every page color-coded. Across the aisle, Belle clung to her pricey legal team, 3 lawyers from Billings, who thought they were walking into routine damage control. The audience was split like a wedding divided. On the left, ranchers, longtime residents, and environmental advocates defending property rights. On the right, subdivision homeowners confused, furious about the surprise assessments. In the back, Skylar live-streamed every second for her journalism project. Commissioner Jana Torres banged the gavel, her voice sharp. "We are here to address allegations regarding Rural Service District financial management and administrative authority. Mr. Holloway, as complainant, you have the floor." I rose slowly, feeling the weight of generations behind me. "Commissioners, what I'm about to present represents the largest municipal fraud case in Cedar Ridge County history. Exhibit 1, faded papers from 1962 establishing me as district administrator, granting budget oversight over every municipal service here. For 3 years, I had unknowingly held that authority Bell exploited to siphon nearly $2 million in public funds. Bell's attorney tried to interrupt. "Objection. This isn't a trial." Torres snapped. "Mr. Holloway has the floor." I flipped open the financial analysis. Numbers that told the story more clearly than words. My ranch alone funded 60% of the district's $200,000 annual budget, money funneled away into fraudulent contracts to prop up private subdivision perks. The exhibits piled up like evidence in a war crimes tribunal. Security contracts billing for $100,000 for $80,000 worth of work. Landscaping costs for HOA property disguised as emergency road repairs. Pool chemicals and tennis court lighting logged as public safety infrastructure. And then came the bombshell. Tucker's own social media posts documenting his crimes. In real time, he'd pocketed over $100,000 selling access to my private land, dodging federal taxes. Every Instagram promo, every event, Every commercial deal was theft of my family's heritage. The chamber filled with crystal-clear audio, Tucker bragging about profits, Bell coaching him on false police statements, infrared video of the fence gutting, conspiracy, their own voices narrating the crime. I let the silence hang before speaking. They didn't just steal my land. They stole my family's legacy and sold it back to strangers for content. Then came the knockout blow. Bell's recorded attempt to bribe me with $50,000 for silence. Her voice admitting accounting irregularities. Her heels clicking desperately across my pasture as her empire unraveled. Commissioner Torres leaned forward, granite-faced. Mrs. Thornwick, do you wish to respond? Bell pushed aside her lawyer. Standing on shaky legs, these are misunderstandings, accounting errors. Maybe miscommunication about service boundaries. We never intended. Torres cut her off. We just heard you on tape offering bribes and admitting financial misconduct. This is far beyond miscommunication. The community testimony only deepened the wreckage. Chuck Morrison described harassment. On neighboring ranches, elderly subdivision residents told of foreclosure threats. Dr. Rebecca Martinez presented shocking before and after photos of ecological destruction from the commercialized lake, but the most devastating voice came from Margaret Henderson, the neighbor forced to sign false complaints. With tears streaming, she said, "We trusted her. Bell told us Garrett was dangerous, that our property values would collapse if we didn't act. She threatened foreclosure through her husband's bank. We were terrified." The commissioners voted unanimously. All HOA contracts terminated pending investigation. Financial irregularities referred to state and federal prosecutors. My authority as district administrator affirmed and commended. Sheriff Collins confirmed criminal investigations into embezzlement, conspiracy, tax fraud, and false reporting. The FBI's white-collar unit took the financial side. Tucker faced federal tax charges and trespassing violations. As reporters swarmed the exits, Bell tried to slip out a side door only to be met by furious subdivision residents, demanding answers. Her suburban fouade collapsed in 2 hours flat. Friday's headline said it all. HOA president arrested in massive fraud scandal. Rural Service District corruption exposed. 6 months later, justice tasted like hot coffee on my porch, watching the sunrise shimmer over the lake where my family's legacy now stood safe. Bell received 18 months in federal prison and was ordered to repay for $100,000. Tucker got community service, 5 years probation, and a permanent ban on monetizing social media. His accomplices served 6 months in county jail plus restitution. The civil suit brought even sweeter closure, $500,000 in damages, plus seizure of Tucker's truck and cameras. Bell's house proceeds vanished into escrow. Her husband's bank collapsed under federal scrutiny, stripping them of the rest. But the real victory wasn't the money. The real victory was justice. The new HOA leadership issued a public apology during a crowded community gathering, officially creating the HOA, a court of formal acknowledgement of historic ranching practices and a permanent safeguard against outside interference. Bell's loyalists were replaced with honest people who recognized that rural communities thrive through cooperation, not colonization. A court order permanently blocked Tucker's access to the lake, with any violation automatically classified as a felony. On my land, commercial use was declared a federal crime, carrying penalties of up to 10 years in prison. The environment began healing right away. Waterfowl returned. The invasive weeds planted by careless social media tourists started to wither. The natural balance my great-grandfather had preserved for decades came back. With the money we recovered, I founded the Rural Heritage Protection Fund, offering legal help to landowners enduring similar HOA abuses. Within 6 months, we had assisted 47 families across Montana in defending their property rights from suburban intruders. Donations from ranchers, farmers, and rural residents poured in, growing the fund beyond $2 million. My proudest achievement became the scholarship program for agricultural students. In the first year, 12 young people from ranch families received full tuition with priority for studies in land management, environmental science, and agricultural law. Skylar changed her major to investigative journalism. Our struggle had inspired her to pursue stories of rural injustice wherever they existed. But the ripple effects went even further than I imagined. Montana's legislature passed the Rural Property Rights Protection Act, tightening oversight of service districts and enforcing transparency in municipal contracting. HOA financial corruption was reclassified as a felony with mandatory minimum sentences. The law was nicknamed the Bell Bill in recognition of our battle. National property rights groups began using our case materials as educational resources, training rural landowners to understand their legal standing and defend themselves against harassment. Our story appeared in textbooks, agricultural journals, and documentary films exploring land rights in America. 1 year later, we launched the first annual Rural Heritage Days Festival, drawing more than 5,000 attendees to celebrate agriculture, conservation, and community collaboration. The festival highlighted sustainable ranching, environmental restoration, and the benefits of working with local families rather than fighting them. Former followers of Tucker's social media page were now learning about land stewardship, wildlife protection, and the real effort required to preserve Montana's beauty. The lake itself was transformed into an educational site where university students studied ecosystem recovery and sustainable recreation management. Local businesses that had abandoned me during Bell's campaign returned, offering apologies and renewed partnerships. Even the feed store manager admitted he'd only withdrawn support because Bell's husband's bank had threatened his loan, a form of economic blackmail. Despite everything we had endured, and we had prospered. Last weekend, I stood at the lake's edge watching my daughter teach environmental science students about watershed protection. I thought of my great-grandfather, Augustus, who had settled this land armed only with determination and legal proof of his rights. A century later, those same documents defended his legacy against suburban opportunists who believed money and influence outweighed law and fairness. The water rippled against the stones where my grandmother Eleanor's ashes were laid to rest, carrying forward her wisdom and memory. Meadowlarks sang over open pastures where cattle now grazed peacefully, no longer harassed by tourists or commercial exploitation. My grandfather used to say the land teaches patience, but it also teaches justice. Sometimes bullies pick battles they cannot win. When someone tries to steal your heritage, you don't just fight back, you make sure they can never do it to anyone else. Share your own HOA nightmare in the comments. You may have more power than you realize. And hit that subscribe button, because next week I'll tell you how a retired teacher toppled an entire corrupt school board. Armed only with a calculator and public records requests, the land endures. Justice triumphs, and Montana ranchers never back down from bullies who mistake kindness for weakness. Thanks for tuning in to HOA Stories. If this story had you cheering or cringing, leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next wild HOA saga.